Howdy! Welcome to a new episode of the Gear Knob. This is my first proper episode, so I'm gonna take this time to talk about something kind of important, near and dear to my heart. How I fell out of love with American muscle cars. So, let's rewind time a bit to my youth, back in the 90s. As I'm walking down my quiet little New England town, and I stumble across this bright yellow GT Mustang, with the old 4.6 liter V8. I mean, not a good car, but for me as a kid, oh my god, it was the coolest thing in the world. It had, these big flared air intakes and this aggressive stance, and I was like, oh my god, that's so cool! But, and then I, discovered the old Mustangs, the 60s Mustangs. So I'm like, oh, these are so cool looking. And that, led me to the old Shelbys. And it's like, oh, it's got a snake on it, a Cobra. That's really cool. And then that led me to look at other old Ford cars. And I came to, lo and behold, what I still think is one of the most beautiful cars ever made. The 1956 Ford Thunderbird. And it was like, oh, wow, that's gorgeous. It's got these beautiful rounded lines, and, little ram air intake up top, a big V8 under the hood. It was like, my young mind was blown. This was, back when I was a little kid, back in early grade school. I remember reading Tom Sawyer in grade school, and we had to do a paper on it where, at the end of Tom Sawyer, Tom ends up with a rather large sum of money, enough that he's set for life, he can get pretty much whatever he wants. And we had to write a paper about how if we had gotten a great sum of money, what would you do with it? And one of the things I said is I'd buy my dream car. I'd buy that 1956 Ford Thunderbird, and I'd paint it in a dark neon blue, not neon, a dark navy blue with just a hint of metal flake, and just the thought of that is still like, oh, that's so beautiful. Anyway, now fast forward another decade, some odd years. Somewhere late in high school, early college, I discovered a webcomic, which I will probably link in the description, called Misfile. Now, Misfile is a webcomic that is pretty awesome, honestly. It's kind of it's a slice of life story about a street racer with some supernatural elements thrown in. Long story short, Angel's fuck up causes a boy to wake up as a girl and another girl to lose 2 years of her life, and they're the only ones that remember the change. So, yeah, it's but at the heart and soul of it, it's about their time and trials as young adults finishing up high school, getting ready to go on to college, and it's really a good comic, and there's a lot of cool cars in it because this character Ash, who went to bed one night as a boy, woke up the next morning as a girl, and is a big street racer and spends all his time fawning over his baby, a Mercury XR4 Ti, which to any Europeans who might be watching this is essentially is essentially a slightly detuned version of the Ford Escort Cosworth. There's some history there, so on. But so I started reading this comic with some cool cars in it and things, and started watching a bit of Top Gear and started learning about things. And right around this time that I started driving more. I had my license for a few years at this point, and was and always enjoyed driving. I was very proud of myself that almost immediately after getting my license, I went out and learned how to drive stick. And I've always preferred driving with a proper manual gearbox. Flappy paddles they get you around the track a little faster, but there's some just that kinesthetic experience of slamming the clutch down and flicking into gear, rev matching perfectly, heel towing, all that stuff is great. But anyway, so I was starting to drive more, and I was starting to realize something as, I learned more about cars and what went into them and what was underneath the skin. Because before, I just kind of judged cars on if I liked the way they look and if the engine was big, American V8, best thing in the world, all that. So where did the love for muscle cars go? Well, as I started discovering things, and I started realizing that top speed really doesn't matter in the real world. In fact, it doesn't even matter that much on a racetrack. Acceleration, absolutely. But top speed, there's not many racetracks in the world that are long enough straight to get most sports and supercars up to top speed. It really only matters, when you're doing quarter-mile drags and stuff like that, or if you get, a really big runway or something like that. So, I started going, guess top speed's not that important. Acceleration is, but where it really got fun was in the corners. I realized that if you're going to go to a racetrack, or if you're going to go down some of the supreme driving roads in my neck of the woods, the white and green mountains of New Hampshire and Vermont, respectively, corners are where the fun is. You just leaning in and diving between and shifting and all this stuff. That's what started getting me excited. So I started getting more excited and about cornering and handling, and then I started learning about how you achieve good handling. Of course, proper aerodynamics helps, but real active aero is pretty darn expensive, and of course, racers or anything like, bolt-on spoilers and things like that. You really need to fine-tune these things, and most of the time, the auto manufacturer or an experienced tuner is going to know a lot better than that forum that said, "Oh yeah, the spoiler the spoiler will add a ton of downforce to your car." The thing is, if the spoiler's angles a little off, I have a friend who's a pilot, and maybe someday you'll see him on this channel because he's a big car guy too. But so I'm very familiar with the concept of lift. I know quite a bit about aerodynamics, and I thought about being an engineer at one point. Oh well. Anyway, so I started learning more about suspension setup and chassis and all that stuff, and started learning about independent rear suspension, something that Camaros didn't adopt until what was it? I don't remember exactly what year the first Transformers movie came out, but yeah, right about then. And the Mustang didn't adopt until just a couple of years ago. And what a live rear axle means. Now, for those that don't know, a live rear axle is when you have your rear wheels and it's a single fixed axle going between those two gears. There's a diff in the middle to make sure that the wheels aren't stuck together unless you fuse the diff or something like that. And on a rear wheel drive car, wheels are driven, but they're solidly linked together. Now, the problem with that is you go over a bump, it pushes one wheel up, the other one's going to turn, and all of a sudden you've only got one wheel getting traction, and all of a sudden that has less traction, so, whoa, that's not a good thing if you're trying to go through a corner really fast. And, yeah. And whereas independent rear suspension, the axles move independently. There's two axles back there connected by a differential, and so on and so forth. They can actually move independently of each other. So, obviously better for handling. And it was right when I learned about those things that pin dropped. I love the look of muscle cars, especially 50s and 60s muscle cars. I think they're gorgeous vehicles. But anything made from at least 1980 to probably about 2012 to 15, under the muscle car moniker, I want nothing to do with. Most of the 70s was pretty crappy too. I mean, there were a couple of good looking cars in the 70s, but a lot of the 70s sucked. So when it came to muscle cars, because emissions regulations were strangling them and things, so they didn't even have that old school American grunt to them anymore. So where, leave me. Well, I discovered that I don't really like muscle cars. I really don't like driving most of them. There are a few exceptions here. The new Corvette Stingrays are great. The new Shelby GT350, love it. But for the most part, I gravitate more towards European cars. I owned a Fiat 500 Abarth, which I loved. I also owned a Dodge Challenger, which I didn't love so much. And yeah, it's so. As it stands right now, Lotus, Alfa Romeo, Porsche, those are like my favorite car companies right now. I mean, obviously I love Ferrari, but, and I really wish I could still love those muscle cars the way I used to, because they're gorgeous. They look so cool. But that's the way things go. And I just realized, no, I don't love them. Now I'm going to go back to my European hot hatch and or mid-engine sports car, which I don't actually have. I drive a Mazda 3 wagon, because wagons are cool. Have a good night. Thank you.